After 2 decades in space and 13 years orbiting Saturn, NASA's Cassini mission has finally come to an end. This morning, the spacecraft made its final descent into Saturn's atmosphere, but before it was destroyed, it transmitted one last cache of information back to Earth. For more on this, I'm joined by Commander Chris Hadfield, former Canadian astronaut who was the first Canadian to walk in space. Good to talk to you this morning, Commander.
Morning, Jen. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Remind us what the original purpose of Cassini was.
To try and learn more, well, really fundamentally about planets, to try and learn more about Earth. But it had two big objectives. One was to look at Saturn itself. Why does Saturn have rings? But the other was to try and land a probe on this enormous moon of Saturn to see what a moon way out there on the edge of the solar system would be like. The moon's called Titan. It's bigger than planet Mercury. And Cassini accomplished both of those things and way, way more.
Yeah. I want to show a tweet from NASA that said, our Cassini Saturn spacecraft is now one with the planet it studied for so long. The rest is science. Hashtag goodbye, Cassini. A lot of people want to know, Chris, why did the satellite have to crash into or burn up in the atmosphere instead of just drifting off to space like some other satellites have?
Well, it wouldn't drift off to space because it was in orbit around Saturn. The trouble is Saturn has 62 moons and, of course, the rings. And some of those moons, incredible as this may sound, might be the sort of place that life exists because they have heat and water. And the worst thing we could have done was what if inadvertently that old derelict satellite had crashed into one of those moons and somehow contaminated it? We wanted to be sure that wouldn't happen, and we knew one good way to end Cassini's life and really to burn it up was to drive it into that enormous gravity well of the planet itself. And just within the last hour, that's what happened. Its deathly, fiery plunge as it reached the very end of its useful life down into the upper atmosphere of Saturn.
Wow. Can you possibly narrow down for us perhaps the most important information Cassini provided NASA with?
Yeah, I think three things. We know what rings are made of now. When Galileo, 407 years ago, first looked through his telescope at Saturn, and he didn't know what to make of those rings. Well, now we understand they're primarily ice and water ice, and it's a temporary thing. A lot of planets have rings for a while, but they may only last 1 million years. The second is there is a moon going around Saturn that has a thick, heavy atmosphere and liquid flowing down the surface. If you glance at it, it could be somewhere on Earth. It's not. It's super cold, and the liquid is not water. It's methane or something. But to think that that exists out there, it just opens our mind to the possibility of the environments around the solar system and the universe. The third, though, and maybe, Jen, the thing that is the most important, is there's a moon going around Saturn called Enceladus. And what we discovered is it is a water moon. It's like a completely enveloped ocean, and it is spitting water, heated water, out into the universe that's feeding one of the rings of Saturn. And so we know there's a place, even way out there in the solar system, that has liquid water and a hot central core, the kind of conditions where life first developed on Earth 4 billion years ago. So it opens lots of questions, but maybe, just maybe, that's the place that someday we'll see whether we're alone in the universe or not. So Cassini served really well for 20 years, orbiting Saturn for the last 13, and it started to tantalizingly teach us about the universe itself.
Fascinating stuff. Love having you on this morning, Chris. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Sean.
Okay.